Normally what happens when a console gets old is that games become cheaper, and it takes many years before prices start slowly going up. But there's one system in particular that really doesn't follow that trend here in North America, and that's the PlayStation Vita. I think that's an interesting phenomenon because games of other consoles of that age don't demand these prices. All the examples I'm going to show have been sold on eBay in the last 2 months or so the prices are all pretty recent. A lot of games, even ones that are relatively common, go for higher prices than I expected. Sometimes they're missing cases, yet they still end up fetching prices somewhat close to the original MSRP. Last year, I even saw Madden 13 going for around 80 US, which is pretty insane considering that it's an old sports game, though prices have become slightly more reasonable lately. But still, almost $30 for games like this? That's a bit high, I think. Things get even more intense if you start looking at some more niche or fan-servicey games, which the Vita has plenty of. Our No Search Plus is a good example of a game escalating in price rather quickly. Look how expensive it is, even with the limited edition part of it missing. That's pretty insane. But the most expensive Vita game I've ever come across is the limited edition of Hyperdimension Neptunia Rebirth 1. I actually own every single limited edition Neptunia game released in the West, except for this one and that PC trilogy that only consists of stuff that's already in other LEs. Well, it was limited to only 1,000 copies, and it sold out pretty much instantly. Since they now go for around $1,000, I don't think I'll ever be able to own a copy unless I win the lottery or something. I'm still disappointed that I didn't manage to get a copy, and I think about it every time I glance at my Neptunia collection, which is pretty much every day. Well, obviously that's an extreme example, but the main point I'm trying to make is that on average, even used games fetch higher prices than they would on other systems. So what is it that's driving up the prices? What makes Vita games so collectible? I think there are a few reasons. Firstly, it's a good console that proved to be unpopular and therefore resulted in low sales. That in itself makes it interesting. It's a bit like the Dreamcast, popular with collectors now, but not with the general public back in the day. It's a very good system with nice graphics and no big inherent flaws in functionality. It just works very well, but it just happens to not have that many AAA titles. Also, I'm not sure if this is the case for all people who collect for the Vita, but I feel like I'm holding a little treasure in my hand. I'm kind of proud to own one. Something the Vita also offers is a very large library of niche games, specifically Japanese ones. From JRPGs, dungeon crawlers, rhythm games, visual novels, to fan service. It's all available on this handheld, and which has resulted in a small but enthusiastic install base. A lot of people who are into these non-mainstream games are willing to spend a bit more money in order to get limited editions and things like that. That means publishers are able to pump out limited editions for many of their games without having to worry too much about making a loss. Sometimes certain games are only available as limited editions, like our No Search Plus and the Senran Kagura games. So in the end, a decently large percentage of the physical releases consist of short print runs. Speaking of limited production runs, that leads us perfectly into the next topic, scalping. Oh yeah, that's definitely a thing. Scalping tickets isn't new, but I first noticed this phenomenon happening in gaming with the Neptunia limited editions for the PS3 back when NIS America was publishing them. Scalpers pre-ordered so many games, which meant a lot of people were not able to secure a copy for themselves. I remember seeing copies of the Neptunia Mark II limited editions selling for $250 to almost $300 on eBay, which is nuts considering this game was originally only about $65. Scalpers were even selling their pre-ordered copies before they were released. It was pretty intense. With Vita games these days, it's not that extreme because many of the publishers set limits on how many copies you can order. But it still happens. People find a way around these measures, and it really drives up prices because there are always people who are willing to spend the money to get the games they want. And finally, it's easier to collect for the Vita than some older or more popular consoles. All games are relatively new, so most of them are in pretty good condition. There's barely any literature to go missing because there usually isn't any. The cases don't take up much space, and because it's not a popular console, you don't have to buy that many games to get a complete collection, whatever your definition of a complete collection is. That means people are willing to spend a bit more money per game on average. Those are my theories anyway. I'm just going from my own observations here. This was a little bit of a different video today, but hopefully you still found it interesting. I kind of like talking about these sorts of topics, so hopefully you like that sort of thing as well. If you agree or disagree or have your own opinions about Vita collecting, let me know in the comments. Catch me on the thingies on the screen, Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video.